Hello, I'm delighted to welcome you all here today to the second in the series of Finance for the Future Awards events. Today we have a masterclass in authentic integrated thinking, connecting purpose, people, planet and profit with everyday decision making. I'm Veronica Poole, Global IFRS and Corporate Reporting Leader at Deloitte. And I'm delighted that joining me today I have Alan Stewart, CFO of Tesco, and Joe Allanson, EVP, Chief Accountant and Controller at Salesforce. Alan and Joe, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Many of you will already be very familiar with Tesco and Salesforce, but for those who aren't, Tesco is a UK-based global retailer with over 40,000 employees, serving millions of customers online and in stores every week. Salesforce are a US-based software company providing CRM and complementary software to enable their clients to connect with their customers in a new way. Salesforce and Tesco are both previous Finance for the Future award winners for communicating and embedding integrated thinking. And both Alan and Joe have been judges at the awards. So we really do have highly qualified and experienced leaders in the field of integrated thinking with us today. And like me, Alan and Joe and their companies feel very passionately about this topic, and it will be great to hear their stories. But before we launch into this session, let me encourage you to engage with our speakers and submit your questions by using the Q&A function on screen. Do feel free to submit your questions at any point. We have a team working behind the scenes, and they will make sure that we get to see your questions, and we will, of course, endeavor to answer as many as we can in the times that we have. We will also be using interactive polling during today's session. So let us test the software. And so can I please ask you to answer one very simple question? What type of organization do you work for? So the choices that are on the screen are relatively straightforward: corporate, preparer, NGO, think tank, academia, consultant, accountant, advisor, regulatory body, public sector or government, or other. So hopefully we will be able to see the results very shortly.
Let's give a cheer for the corporate preparers.
Right, can we see the results now? Don't know, I think we're having a little bit of a blip here with technology. Okay, well, that's the polling not working. Okay, so I think we will have to skip the polling, which is a shame because we were supposed to be jumping onto the next big question, which was very much around what are the elements of integrated thinking? Because as I did my introduction, I used that term so many times. But I guess what we really need to do is to align the definition and align our understanding of what integrated thinking really stands for. And there are many components to it that we can talk about. And so I will try and run through the sort of components that we had on the poll questions for you. And hopefully they would make sense. But what I really would like to do is then Alan and Joe to tell us as to which ones of these they view as important and how do they define integrated thinking. So the elements that I was thinking about were things like active governance over broader factors, connection between functions across the organization, so breaking out of that silo mentality, being able to consider various trade-offs between different capitals, e.g. financial versus human, social capital or environmental, having non-financial data being subjected to the same rigor of governance and controls as financial data, having the broader set of that data feeding into incentives and targets. Well, of course, communications, and following from that, producing an integrated report, considering broader impacts of an organization on people, planet, and economy. Things like various things that you may do in order to connect different types of communications with various stakeholders and between the different groups of stakeholders. All of those issues could potentially be used in order to define integrated thinking. But let us go to Alan and Joe. What do you make of these particular ingredients that I have just listed? And what would you define integrated thinking as? What would be your core elements? Joe, let's start with you.
All right. Well, thank you, Veronica. Let me up-level the dialogue just a second here, because I think on integrated thinking, I think first of all, everyone needs to understand for their own companies, their corporate mission statement, the values of your own organization, what motivates your workforce to do the impossible, to change the world. And the more integration, the better. I looked at a lot of those elements that you cited, Veronica, and I agree with all of them except for one item, and that is this concept of a separate. I amplify the word separate sustainable strategy. I don't think you can go as fast with something that's separate, and I think that's why I'm a big believer of integrated thinking.
Okay, that's brilliant. And Alan, what's your reaction?
Well, absolutely agree with what Joe has said, and I think for me, it started with integrated reporting. If we go back some time, and then it's moved much more into the integrated thinking. So all of the factors that you call out, I absolutely echo what Joe has said in terms of the just the need to have it as a core part of the business, the strategy, and linking absolutely to everything that our colleagues feel and think about it. And then I would also concentrate and think very carefully about the element of functional elements of the organization working together. To me, that's a core part of it. But I would actually echo everything in that you called out in terms of those different factors. And at Tesco, it's something which we are continuing to make progress in, because as the more and more the integrated thinking, the more and more the organization actually sees the benefits of that integrated thinking and ways of working.
Excellent. So apparently the audience could see all of these options and elements in front of them. It's only us who couldn't. So actually, hopefully a lot of this makes sense to you, and it would be interesting to see how the poll results compare to what you have just described. But whilst we are, there we go. So we have got that. And look, considering trade-offs between capitals is the front runner, which is, I guess, not surprising, because that goes to the heart of integrated thinking. And then, of course, active governance over broader factors is also very close up there, together with consideration of broader impacts of an organization. I think those would be the core elements, and I think that's consistent with what you guys are saying. So okay, well, these are the elements, and obviously it's very interesting to try and align your understanding with what we believe integrated thinking is. But how do we do it in practice? How do you even begin to start implementing it, applying it in practice? So, Joe, let's go back to you on that one.
Well, since when we started several years ago, Veronica, I don't know if we really knew what we were doing. And I think we started off with just simply gathering information that it had already existed. And I think it's we wanted to, first of all, define what kind of role Salesforce wanted to play in this important area, and how we were trying to make success. So that's how we started. And then by certainly trying to articulate this in like a strategic point of view, we started realizing how many activities were going on throughout our own company. And I think that's really where it started a movement and a momentum. And it started off with just really understanding it. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show. But again, we started off just gathering information and then clarifying what we wanted to do as part of our strategic and financial opportunities and long range growth. So.
Okay, well, that's Salesforce. What about Tesco, Alan? How did you start thinking about integrated thinking in your organization, and how did you kick it all off?
Thanks, Veronica. And it's surprising how often the experiences of other people that I talk to in this area echo some of what we've experienced. And certainly, Joe, I agree with what you've said. And in terms of some of just starting, not really sure where it'll go. I've been with Tesco for 6 years, and in that time, integrated thinking has been a really important part of our journey. For those of you who don't know Tesco, I joined at a particularly difficult time for the company. Our reputation was really at rock bottom, and our financial results were not even at rock bottom; they were below water. So we really had a tremendous challenge. And of course, you have to focus on that, and you have to focus on the business and improving the financial elements of the business, the trust in the business. But at the same time, we saw it as really important that the integrated thinking was part of it. We've got a lot of stakeholders. We've got over 400,000 colleagues. We serve millions of customers every week in different parts of the world. Our largest market is the UK, and we're sourcing products from thousands of suppliers right across the globe. In fact, we're in virtually every single community in the UK. We are in every single postcode. We have a store in every single postcode in the UK. And our shareholder base amounts to more than 230,000 individual shareholders. And that's far from exhaustive. So sometimes these interests align, and at other times we really have to balance the different elements. So coming back to the poll, the balancing and the trade-offs is a really important part of it. But at all times, we really are trying to navigating that right path and do the right thing for all of our key stakeholders. And having a clear purpose has been a core element of that. And behind the purpose, we have clear organizational values, which come up from our colleagues and are ones which we each and everyone tries to live by every single day. And building on those values, we've created a framework that defines how we make a positive difference to customers, to colleagues, to communities, to suppliers, to shareholders, and the environment. And we've badged it all together in something we call the Little Helps Plan. We first published it to the outside world. It's on our website in 2017, and it captures our approach to ensuring that we're responsible and therefore a sustainable business. It links directly to the way we run the business, and every single part of Tesco is involved in it. It helps us to demonstrate, to monitor, and to improve our performance, both within our own operations and also within the wider supply chain. And we're trying to do this whilst at the same time pursuing transformative change and leading industry-wide action to tackle some of the biggest social and environmental challenges that the world faces today. So it's a big, big ask. We've got 4 pillars. They're remarkably similar to what Veronica opened up the session with. Our 4 pillars are people, our colleagues, both in the business and in the supply chain. Product is the second one, where we serve customers with affordable, healthy, sustainable product. Places is the third. The communities where we have a stake are very important to us. That's on the ground. We're interacting with communities. And finally, the planet, working in a way that protects and enhances and helps deliver on some of the goals we've set ourselves in the planet. So those 4 pillars are really underpinned by a belief which is at the heart of the Little Helps Plan, that with the scale and reach of an organization like Tesco, the smallest thing can make a small change, and that small change adds up to make a huge difference. Really, really key to our thinking and gets everybody motivated. And increasingly, as we all know, the linkage between sustainability, finance, and business are all there, and we have to look at it as a whole. And this year, more than anything, has really helped, I think, underpin that that you need a strategic approach to this, as well as a tactical approach and some specific goals. So we measure the financial performance, and our stakeholders also expect us to measure the environmental and the social impact, helping them to understand what progress we're making against those challenging goals we've set. The finance team, and this is where finance really comes into it, has been instrumental in establishing an online tool for the data collection of these KPIs, and to bring greater alignment between the financial part of the organization and the non-financial reporting. And that's required collaboration from every single team involved in it. We were, for example, the first retailer to publish food waste data, and we're now 80% of the way to ensuring that nothing that we sell that's fit for human consumption goes to waste. I can tell you that 4 or 5 years ago, we were nowhere near that 80%. But by being visible and then tracking it and reporting against it, recognizing that it's a challenging goal, we've really brought finance and the business together. We map the carbon footprint on our dairy farm suppliers, and the farms receive a carbon assessment of the emissions hotspots so that they can help to work on this. And then another example, last year we launched a sustainable basket metric in partnership with the Worldwide Fund, where we're looking to track the environmental impact from farm to fork of our top 20 most important products and most popular products. So by aligning this financial and non-financial reporting, it's allowed us to provide our investors with a more holistic view of the whole business. And this year, and I'm really delighted that this has happened, that responsibility has moved from the business into finance, and finance will own it wholly. It's that part of the governance. Again, one of the poll results was the fact that governance is an important part of it. So those KPIs and targets are built now into our financial reporting and our business planning, and we've got 3-year roadmaps for each of them. Finance has been critical in developing the meaningful and measurable KPIs and then challenging the business to deliver against them. Small things do make a big difference. We changed the light bulbs in our stores to LEDs, nothing new, nothing particularly revolutionary. But for Tesco, that gave us £37 million of efficiency savings, money which we can invest back, which is good for the business and good for the planet. So I'm hugely proud of all that we're doing at Tesco. We're pursuing this transformative change, we're challenging ourselves, and we're leading industry-wide action to tackle some of the biggest societal and environmental challenges that the world faces. But there's always more we can do. And that's something which actually keeps me excited, which keeps the team motivated. We're constantly looking at ways we can challenge ourselves to think more holistically, more integrated, both within finance and the role of Tesco within society. So we know that our customers, and ultimately as a retail organization, our customers are the most important part. They want to shop with a responsible and sustainable business. They want to feel proud that they're shopping. They want our colleagues want to feel proud. So integrating our thinking is no longer for us a nice to have. It's something which is actually vital to the future of the business. Thanks for that.
And in fact, Alan, you have just very much rerun the case as to why judges felt that Tesco was absolutely a winner in the Embedding Integrated Thinking Award at the last year's Finance for the Future Awards. The judges were extremely impressed with your enthusiasm and, frankly, how your core programs that you were just describing, every little help makes a big difference, drives daily activities pretty much through all the pillars of people, products, and places that are critical to your strategy. Tesco demonstrated how your plan really was fully integrated into business plans across the group, into the measurement, into accountability process that you have within the organization. And you have just given some amazing examples of how that really works in practice. It is really core to your long-term strategy, to your planning, to your day-to-day decision-making. Now, like Tesco, Salesforce has also received a Finance for the Future award. That was in the category of the communication of integrated thinking. And judges there were very keen to emphasize that in order for integrated thinking to really sort of shine through the communications, it really needs to become part of an organizational DNA. And Salesforce demonstrated that in abundance, that integrated thinking wasn't just part of that DNA and culture, it was the day-to-day. Very similar to what you have just been describing, Alan, for Tesco. And what Salesforce demonstrated is the depth and the breadth of their integrated thinking across the organization through understanding and responding to stakeholder expectations, placing a shift to low carbon economy at the center of their approach to managing the non-financial data, applying the same rigor to the sustainability data as they do with the financial data. So funnily enough, very similar themes to what Alan has just been describing for Tesco. So we have these two amazing categories in the awards, one that looks at how you embed it into an organization, and the other looks as to having embedded it into an organization, how do you tell your story? And in judging communicating integrated thinking category, one of the things that we look for as judges is the authenticity of reporting. And what we're looking for here is that integrated thinking needs to shine through the communications and be reflective of what actually happens day to day. So integrated thinking, effectively, if you wish, is a prerequisite for doing integrated reporting. And funnily enough, that approach is very much consistent with the integrated reporting framework, which says that integrated reporting really must be an output of integrated thinking. So I guess moving back to try and test the polls and see whether this works this time round, I really would like to ask you a question, you, the audience, and that is the question as to where are you on your integrated thinking journey? Hopefully a lot of the things that Alan and Joe talked about and the things I have just described about how the judges approach the category, hopefully some of these sound familiar, they resonate, or for some of you it may be, yeah, that's it, that's exactly what I already do, whether you call it integrated thinking or not, whether you have a different term for it, but does it resonate? So let's ask that question. How mature is your integrated thinking journey? So you have a few choices here on the poll. So hopefully we will get to see it this time around. And the questions that you have are very much around the maturity, starting from not ahead of it at all, and then going on to completely there, fully integrated, totally get all the concepts, doing it already, just part of my DNA, pretty much like Joe and Alan were describing a minute ago. So we'll wait for the poll results to appear, and hopefully the magic will work this time around. Aha, marvelous. And look at this, this is fantastic. We've got 42% of people already starting to adopt, starting to implement the concepts and aspects in their operations and decision making. 21% already partially implemented in some of the core aspects of operational and decision making, and another 11 are fully integrated. My goodness, that is extremely encouraging. So if I total this up, that is a significant proportion of you fully familiar with some of these concepts and already aspiring to do it in the day-to-day. I'm thoroughly impressed. So Alan, Joe, what are your reactions to the results? Does that surprise you? What's the overwhelming feeling here? Joe, what do you think about this?
I'm not surprised, Veronica. That's why I guessed myself. I kind of put myself into the shoes of those who are in the audience, because it wasn't that long ago when Salesforce started, and now you fast forward, and the journey can move incredibly quick. And I think we're going to talk about that later today. Is about how can you move from starting to adopt to getting to where Alan and Tesco and Salesforce is today. And we'll talk about that. But I would just kind of start off and just say this, all of you who are just starting to adopt, I think it really starts off with understanding the problem or the crisis and then having to contextualize it for your employees. We found that a way to move to that DNA. It's in your DNA.
Excellent. And Alan, what's your reaction? Is it surprising? Is that consistent with your expectation? You're on mute.
I've been unmuted, I think. I'm so sorry. I think it is. And by definition, people who are listening today have got some idea of what integrated thinking is. I think for all organizations, just like most things that we're doing, there is a constant need to be looking ahead, to be making improvements, to be changing. So even at Tesco, where we are, and we were very fortunate and very surprised to win the award, which Veronica mentioned. But we continue to challenge ourselves, and we continue to surprise ourselves sometimes with some of the areas where we can still make improvements and just really get the different parts working together. And some of the TCFD reporting has been hugely valuable for us in that area, bringing the different teams together, hugely valuable. So for those of you who have put yourself right at the top end, congratulations. There is a raft of people catching up, and they will continue to raise the bar.
And there are, in fact, quite a lot of useful stories out there that can help you on the journey as you try and tackle that integration across your organization. Mm-hmm. So there is a wealth of resources available, including the A4S guides and the recent IRC paper on integrated thinking and strategy. And these two sources include great case studies. Some of these are captured from the awards, and they tell very, very inspirational stories, but give you also practical tools as to how an organization can progress on that journey of integrated thinking.
And Veronica, if I could just add, being part of the A4S CFO network, the finance folk at Tesco have played a part in the workshops and in helping write some of these materials you're working about. It's a hugely valuable part of I think, the organizational experience to have people take part in workshops, to learn from others, and really just to share knowledge and thinking in this area.
Indeed, and we use these guides, and I think they are extremely popular because they are extremely practical, mm-hmm. which just tells that they are written by people who have been doing it in practice. So let us just talk about practice a little bit more. And what I would like to ask Alan and Joe now is how did this integrated thinking, this having embedded it into your DNA, how did it really help you and supported the organizational resilience in supporting it in these difficult times that we will face now, in the times of COVID-19 in particular? But I also would like to understand how you're thinking about the risks and opportunities presented by climate change, because we have got perhaps the most unprecedented times of uncertainties that we're having to live through, what with the pandemic, with the challenges to the economy at large as a result of it, but general economic environment has also been quite challenging. And of course, climate change around the corner. And here for us in the UK, add Brexit into all of that. So quite a lot to worry about. So COVID-19, Alan, how has embedding integrated thinking helped you to weather the pandemic? Is there anything to tell there?
Yeah, it played a huge part. So it's stating the obvious to say that it disrupted the grocery industry more than this year than anything that we've experienced in the last 101 years that Tesco has been in existence. It's been absolutely extraordinary. It's been absolutely challenging. And the challenges were on a scale nothing like we've seen before. But we approached them in exactly the same way as any other crisis or any other issue that we faced in recent years. And we did this by focusing on our purpose, which is to serve shoppers a little better every day, and then ensuring that we do the right thing for our customers and our people throughout. We framed our response around 4 key priorities: ensuring we could provide food for all, the safety of everyone, support for our colleagues, and support for our communities. And even as we started our crisis meetings back in March this year, those and continuing to this very day, those 4 priorities are the basis through which every decision is made, and everything that we decide is looking at and against those 4 priorities. And the speed, like loads of other organizations, the speed at which we were making these changes was absolutely unprecedented. We were getting, as a leadership team, getting hourly and updates. They became daily. We heard them from colleagues, we heard them from suppliers, we heard them from stores, and helping us to quickly make the right decisions for all of our stakeholders. The pressure was immense, felt across all of our teams, because like everybody else, we had to work remotely from early March. And it's incredibly humbling and makes me really, really proud to look back and see the way that we put all of our colleagues, put themselves second, and put our customers and the communities first in everything that we did. So a very, very integrated way of approaching it, and one which has really served us very, very well. The Tesco's finance team played a significant and critical role in this as well. We were making very significant cost decisions. We were making very significant trading decisions. And we worked with colleagues, and we worked across all functions to support the rapid implementation of these vast operational changes we were making across 3,500 stores in the UK and in every market we're in. Our procurement team formed a key part with Shift's focus to look at how we can provide protective equipment for colleagues, providing support for our stores. Finance gave the insight in how customers reacting in terms of what was being demanded, where we had to sometimes limit the supplies, and helping to inform those very rapid decisions, all focused on getting food for everyone. So, for example, in March, as customers were panic buying, and it was panic buying, and one of the challenges of a panic buying, it's like a run on a bank. As soon as somebody thinks that they're going to run out, they rush to get it, and of course it runs out. So you get a circle which creates this increased panic. So we were able to offer the business insight on what lines were under most pressure. In March this year, in the peak week, we sold over 6 million packs of beans, which is 120% higher than in a typical week. Again, what you read about, toilet roll sales, they rose 76% in our peak week, and liquid soap, which was one of the key things, obviously, to sanitize, sales rose 363% on typical sales. So huge surges of demand, which then enabled us to put limits on the availability. And the availability was obviously a challenge in those early weeks. The operational part of the business had to work in, and unfortunately, our charity partners also suffered. So in the UK, we've got a long-standing relationship with a charity called Fair Share, and another one called the Trussell Trust, where we donate food at the end of the day. Every day we do this to food banks and distribution centres. And they needed our help more than ever before at this critical time. So despite those challenges, as an organisation, we also gave them a £30 million support package and also donated food to them as well. So money and food. So I could give you countless numbers of examples of where we gave these. Safety measures were a key area. And then, as I've said already, managing the costs of this, which across an organization as big as we are, add up very, very quickly to significant amounts of money. And we didn't know how long it would last, nor how it would develop. So that's where the integrated thinking came absolutely into its own. As a business, we had to think first about communities, about colleagues and customers, and doing the right thing. And as I say, I'm proud of it. On the colleague front, when the UK instigated the national lockdown, we immediately identified colleagues who were vulnerable, pregnant, or over 70 years old, and we gave them 12 weeks fully paid leave. Without any question, we did it. Within a few weeks, we had 50,000 colleagues who were unable to work because they were ill or because they were vulnerable or self-isolating. And so in that time, we also recruited 47,000 new temporary colleagues to help meet that increased demand. We had pilots who'd been grounded working for us. We had people from all walks of life working in our stores, in our grocery home shopping distribution. So we also prioritized vulnerable customers. We Many of them were unable to come into stores. So we created a dedicated helpline for them. We gave them access to delivery slots for grocery home shopping. And that business grew exponentially. Customers just wanted to stay at home, to be safe, and to get grocery delivered to their front doors. In February, we were serving around 600,000 individual customers every week through our grocery home shopping business. Now, those are online slots, is what we call them. And today, we've got more than 1.5 million. So we more than doubled the size of the business in a very, very short space of time. We felt that this might take us 3 years to achieve as we were looking from a strategic perspective this time last year. But we did it in the matter of about 3 weeks. And in a huge, short space of time, we shifted the onus of the business in order to get food to all of our customers. We could grow it more slowly. We could have done that. It would have cost us, it would have been better economics, but we can't only look through that lens of profitability. We have to look through the integrated, holistic lens of how do we serve our customers in order to help them feel safe and secure in this environment. Sometimes it isn't easy. Plastic waste would be an example. We had a target to cut out 1 billion items of plastic from our supply chain in this year. We also had reduced carrier bags. And last year we announced that we would stop using carrier bags for grocery home shopping. That was part of our 1 billion items of plastic that we didn't want to use anymore. But this meant that the 250 million fewer carrier bags would be delivered to customers' doors, and we would be saving 2,000 tons of plastic had we carried through with that. But in order to help the online surge, help people feel safer, help the fact that they needed to take groceries from their front door to their kitchen, we reintroduced plastic bags. So this is a trade-off of some of the capitals that we've been talking about. So we also reintroduced plastic packaging in some of our bakery products in stores, because these things customers worry about. And whilst they do worry about the element of waste and they don't want to be using plastic, ultimately safety and what I'm eating and how I feel about that is paramount. And so we had to make those changes. So what else can I think about? Net carbon. Earlier this month, we shared our ambition as Tesco to become a net carbon zero business in the UK by 2035. This is 15 years earlier than our previous target. And we've done it by already starting to roll out electric delivery vehicles for the grocery home shopping. And we've also focused very heavily as a business, even in the UK with its weather and all you know about the weather, on solar heating and solar energy. And we've signed major deals to create 3 new solar farms in the UK. So running the business sustainably is, I hope you can see from all of this, really, really important for us. And it's also important to our customers. Our customers continually tell us that whether it's emissions, healthy food sourcing, affordability and sustainability, these are really important for them. One of the real challenges of COVID-19 has been the fact that the teams are all working remotely from home. And the opportunity for collaboration, which is so important in the area of doing things differently, for inventiveness, for change, collaboration is never quite the same. We've always focused on a positive culture, and we've always focused on that in the finance team as much as anywhere else in the business. We take a very open approach to flexible working in order to promote a better work-life balance. And one of the benefits of the last 9 months has been that the whole organization now understands what we mean when we say we really don't mind where you work. You can work from home. We want you to get your work-life balance in the way that works with you. And so I now have people in my finance team who will work from 10 o'clock in the night till 2 a.m. in the morning. They will start late. They will take their kids to school. They really are working in a flexible way. We've introduced a lunch hour across the whole of finance where we don't schedule meetings. We're trying to get that work-life balance. And we're focused on the well-being part of the organization as much as anywhere else. I think the crisis has really brought home the need to work collaboratively and to collaborate across the whole organization. And we've focused in finance very strongly on working with and listening. So we have sessions which are much more frequent than they were before. Some of those are just give people the opportunity to ask questions. Some of them are learning sessions. Some of them are fun sessions. And it's an area of continued development for us. So I think as I step back and look at it from a COVID perspective, without the benefits of the integrated thinking approach we've had, we would have struggled. I'm sure we would have coped, but we wouldn't have done as well and as cohesively. So that's it on COVID. Happy to ask any questions from the audience specifically, but as you'd understand, it's been an incredible part of the last year in Tesco's history.
And Alan, you gave here some amazing stories of trade-offs that you had to make, which is probably one of the most challenging aspects of applying integrated thinking in practice. And so difficult decisions, as you say, your different objectives have to be weighed. And I can see that there are some questions from the audience coming in around the trade-offs specifically. So that was really quite helpful, you actually pointing them out. So I wanted to ask Joe about this question next about COVID, because Salesforce is a very different organization with completely different challenges when it comes to perhaps dealing with a pandemic. So what did it mean for you? What trade-offs, what aspects of integrated thinking came to play as you thought through this challenge?
Well, thank you, Veronica. And, Alan, I'm certainly inspired by the commentary that you made here. Similar to Alan's company, I would say this to you: everyone was impacted by the pandemic, and certainly I think what caught everyone by surprise was the speed as to how fast we all ended up working from home and remotely. Because speed matters, and Salesforce came to a point of view that we're in the business of saving lives. And how can we do that as a technology provider? In order to move fast, we had to leverage off our strategic plans. And interestingly, one of our biggest parts of our strategic plan is a method referred to as business is the greatest platform for change. And we had to really re-alter that very quickly. And then a couple of the areas that we went to is we realized that, hey, we are fantastic technology people. We can put out products very quickly that can help people. And Salesforce put out products referred to as work.com to help businesses involved with contact tracing. We then expanded that program or product for schools and how to bring kids back to school, how to engage directly with parents in the community. I mean, when you're in the business of customer success and customer relationship management software, you're using data to drive different relationships. We've now introduced work.com for vaccines. And once a vaccine is more generally available, we hope to power the world's largest vaccination program using our technology. So again, we're trying to do it in ways in which we can contribute. We're not folks like Alan and frontline workers, but we have a role to play, and we're in the business of saving lives. We also took our philanthropy and said, there's a crisis in the US in terms of protective personal equipment, masks, gloves for hospitals. We're not a medical distributor. We don't do that, but we have contacts. We have supply chain contacts across the globe, and working in partnership with so many in our community, we were fortunate to be able to not only secure, source, distribute over 50 million pieces of PPE across 300 hospitals. So again, using our strategic plan and retooling it very quickly for the situation at hand, and adjusting. And that's where finance plays a huge role in this aspect, because it's not just one person, it's everyone. Everyone plays a role to helping our world.
So interesting challenges there, and a very, as you say, very different challenge for you, not being in the front line like Alan, but nonetheless, integrated thinking did kick in, and you did have to play your part in this story. So, but turning that experience, I mean, a lot to the next challenge. A lot of people say, you know, climate change has a lot of similarities with COVID, and so I guess what I really would like to understand, how is an organization like Salesforce thinking about the impact of climate change on your organization and your role in society, if you wish? How can you help us all address the challenges that it presents?
Well, it's a great question because as we can all understand, every one of these crises is interrelated. Certainly, when you talk about COVID, for example, there's an economic impact. And so it's very similar. Everything is interrelated, and we're trying to solve it holistically. Protecting the planet is a business problem here, and speed is the name of the game. The faster we can move, the better we can be in terms of protecting the planet. And so certainly, you know, it's unfortunately, though, as we all realize, and we were alluding to it earlier, both Alan and I were talking about this, is that there's really no finish line when it comes to climate action and protecting the planet. Certainly, you know, both companies are further ahead in our DNA, and others are starting to adopt. But again, let's remind ourselves that there's no finish line, and we, even as advanced companies, have room to go. When I think about this integrated thinking and trying to solve the business problem, I'll put it in the terms that I think finance professionals might be able to better understand. Because as I was alluding to earlier, with integrated thinking, if you can follow the natural rhythm, the motions of your company, I feel like you can go faster here in so many things. And so if you can contextualize it for your employees, where again, today is as important as COVID. Addressing COVID today is critical. Every day counts. And trying to bring that same concept into the climate action is incredibly important in order to move fast. And so the way I contextualize it for our employees in talking to them is, and again, following the concepts of a natural rhythm, I describe it and it's being a business problem, is analogizing to how do you bring a software product to market? That is something that every trained financial professional understands, is how to bring a product to market. And why does that matter? Because a product is trying to solve a business challenge, a business problem here. And so what I talk about it is we're building out business plans, we're building out target markets, we're building out resource allocation plans, we're setting goals and targets in order to distribute our product and maximize it. And I think if you follow that natural rhythm, anything you do with integrated thinking and how our activities associated with climate action fall very similar. As you can imagine, with bringing a product to market, you set targets, you know, annual, multi-year financial targets. You forecast, you provide actuals. When the information rolls in, there's insights, there's learnings. As I mentioned, when we first started with climate action, we didn't know where we were with renewable energy, zero, net carbon emissions. We didn't know where we were. Those kind of insights and capturing the information allowed us to move faster and adjust. Reporting, quarterly business reviews that we take our employees through. External reporting, Alan was touching on that quite a bit. We also do our external reporting. We bring our board of directors involved into the conversation here. We follow up with targets. We have external assurance that's going on with these types of things. These are all very, very analogous to bringing a product to market. And when I talk like that with our employees at Salesforce, we end up taking away the scariness of, whoa, what is this climate action? How are we going to solve it? It's less paralyzing for people. And again, we've contextualized it in a way that they understand and that in their disciplines, and that everybody can help. We're fortunate to have over close to 25% of our employees involved in some type of Earth Force activity, which is incredible to have an affinity group, because now we have all of these folks that are pushing us faster and faster. So let me give you kind of examples of how we've used this, because I've, again, analogized it to bring a product to market. A very simple concept. Every finance professional understands that. Everybody in the company understands that. It doesn't create silos. It's not just a one-off thing. It's what we're all doing. And so how have we turned that into it? We have produced a product called Sustainability Cloud, which is what I call carbon accounting for businesses to drive climate action here. Again, a tool set that our customers and we can use to track where we are, to drive insights, to monitor, to be able to report, to create an audit trail. So we built a product called Sustainability Cloud. Crazy enough, similar to my metaphor here of bringing a product to market. We're also, as a technologist, we're very active in venture fund and investing in new technologies. We recently just set up another venture fund for $100 million US to really promote and encourage developers to bring products to market faster to help our community in terms of solving situations. We've also been pretty active with philanthropy and the 1 trillion trees conversation that was announced several months ago, with a quest of 1 trillion trees within the next decade, and we have 100 million trees in our bag as well. Also setting up renewable energy in terms of looking at virtual power agreements here, windmills. Those are different types of ideas that make it easy for our finance professionals to not be scared of ideas, but again, to advance them in a way that's a very natural, smooth rhythm for everybody. And let's also not forget other things that you do with our products. We certainly try to win leadership awards with our products to differentiate our products. And that's what A4S meant for us when we entered the contest a couple of years ago. Again, ways in which you can track progress to be incredibly happy about your things is a way to do it. And that's kind of why we've been very happy with our results with what we're doing. But again, as we all know, better, never done. And there is no finish line when it comes to the planet. But we're also out there trying to encourage others to partner with us in this journey. But again, as we've learned running our business over the past 20 years, Veronica, one business can make a change. Thousands of companies can create a movement. And if you're trying to talk about acceleration, that's kind of what we're trying to do as well.
That's brilliant. And Joe, I think what's really quite interesting for me here, I think you talk about translating the challenge into the language that people understand, making it real, making it something that they feel they can contribute meaningfully to. There is an interesting question from the audience here, which I wanted to ask you now, which is the question about how can you help the colleagues break out of the rigid money and stuff numbers basis of decision making? And you talked a little about translation into the language and making sure they understand the challenge. You talk about, it's like selling a product. But what else would you suggest here?
Well, I think, it's a great question. And candidly, if I was in your audience 5 or 6 years ago, Veronica, I probably would have typed in that question myself here. And I think it's back to this point of, I think if you can understand what is the big plans within the company and the direction of the company, doing good and doing well, there's nothing, it's perfect, and it drives more value and acceleration for sure. But I would say is that, if you can align to the corporate plan and you can kind of twist and turn the verbiage around, I think you can really create this opportunity to drive the action. The best ideas at Salesforce have always come from 1 or 2 individuals that have put together a point of view that is highly connected with what's important to us, our values. And that's fantastic. And if you can catch the natural rhythm of the budget process, the annual planning process, you can get your ideas into it, because that's the natural rhythm, if the budgets have already been distributed and you're coming up with an idea months later, it's hard. But if you're in the planning phase and you're tying in with new initiatives that were in direction, it's a lot easier. And again, I try to avoid uphill battles on any type of thing like that. And if I follow the natural rhythm of my company, it's a lot easier.
And I think what you're really describing is what I often reference to as the organizational DNA. It's not as though you're creating something new. You're actually embedding integrated thinking into the DNA of the organization. And at every corner, at every decision, at every turn, you have to think about more than just the financial return. So, and when I put it this way, there is an interesting question then in the audience about these trade-offs. And Alan, you talked quite a lot about this, but Joe, let me ask you this question first, and then Alan, I'd like to hear your comment, because it goes to the, how far would you really go, and how much would you be really prepared to erode financial capital to enhance employee capital? I mean, both of you are the organizations that really depend on human capital. It's an absolutely critical resource. So how would you tackle that challenge? So Joe, you first.
Yeah, one of our biggest values at Salesforce is equality. And, this particular conversation point is really no different than some of the challenges, business problems that we've had to address in the past. And I always suggest to people, look at how your past experiences in your organizational DNA have addressed it. We've had to deal with equal pay for women in technology as an example. And again, there's a pretty material trade-off that's going to go on there is if you have to uplift compensation, for example. Look, it's much easier to do that in the next planning cycle for the next budget, right? It's very difficult to do it mid-year. And so I think those trade-off conversations become much easier in a planning phase when we're actually thinking through about what investments, and we view that the environment, we feel that our community, all of it, our partners, our employees, we're all part of one big stakeholder capitalism movement here. And again, it's all around your stakeholders, and every stakeholder needs a distribution of it. But again, much easier in the dialogue with initiatives in the planning side.
Okay, and Alan, what would be your response to that? How far would you actually go?
I absolutely agree with the way that Joe has set it out. I think that it is a lot easier to do something which you've planned for next year than to try to do it halfway through this year. Absolutely agree with that. And this is where I think some of the longer term targets, particularly the KPIs around the sustainability and the ESG agenda, really lend themselves to proper active thinking and then getting the right waymarks along to that time goal. But I think the other thing is that, and I don't mean this flippantly at all, I really think that if we get out of the mindset of that of course they're trade-offs, but if we try to see the benefits of the other as much as what we're not doing in the one, then I think it creates a different mindset. It links also into the question you asked about money and staff, because ultimately I think we have to believe that there's benefit in what we're doing in order to make that investment. And that's true in each of the capitals and in each of the areas that we're looking at. The challenge is sometimes the measurement of that. And some things are intangible and some things are much more difficult to measure, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be done. So for me, the other thing I'd say in terms of just achieving the thinking is having people talk about it, having people really understand the different issues, and then focus as much, well, actually for more, we do on the how things are done rather than the what it is. The what is easy. The what is, what are we going to do? The how we're going to do it becomes a very important part of everything. And having a feedback loop which constantly tests ourselves against those hows, which are much more behavioral and much more, if you like, less tangible, becomes, I think, an important part of changing the organization to get to these trade-offs, making actually much easier sense to everybody rather than seen as I'm giving up this in order to do that.
And I think you make a really important point there, both about the planning and the measurement here, because the measurement, it's not about necessarily binary outcome, as you say. It is about these factors over time. An investment today, it's not necessarily an erosion. It is an investment potentially for the future that will pay return. and it will pay returns in different ways. And it's how do you measure it and how do you put the right metrics on it that allow for that sort of long-term vision and long-term planning outcomes, I think is extremely important. There's a question here from the audience, which I think is also quite interesting, which goes to the core of how do you bring the organization with you. So one thing is, there is an aspect here which involves the board engagement, but then there is, of course, the aspect that goes to the broader organization and getting people to focus beyond their day-to-day routines and thinking at the bigger picture, looking at the bigger picture, thinking about those values, Joe, you were talking about, thinking about that long term. So what would you suggest? And I really would like to hear both aspects. One, how do you bring your board with you? The board of directors really matters because that obviously sets the tone across the organization, but also how do you bring the whole organization with you? How do you make sure that everyone is on the journey with you, is engaged in this, understands why it is important to look beyond the here and now? So, you go first.
I'll just give a simple example about bringing people along, and Alan touched on it with multi-year planning and looking into the future, because that's a critical aspect of any finance professional, is to look today and then in tomorrow. And here would be an example of how I'm trying to do that, to bring my organization along as well as my board. And I'm using the analogy of a tremendous amount of change in the accounting world. Just a few years ago, revenue recognition rules changed. Well, that's a big deal. Okay, that's a big deal. And that's an enterprise impacting thing. But when I think about the TCFD and the climate mandated disclosures in 2025 and what it turns to be what Alan and I are doing today, which is voluntary today, in just a few years, it's going to be compliance. And so every company needs to wrap their head around what is your climate action story? And you need to plan for that. And so I'm trying to bring my organization along. I'm trying to bring my board along. And I'm using these little opportunities. So go back to what Alan said when he was describing what's going on at his company. Every little action matters, right? Every individual matters. And I'm just using my little activity to drive change. And again, I think if you think about it in the context of these activities that are currently underway, it's much easier to get somebody on board with it. It's very difficult to get people on board if you're going to acquire a business, for example. That's a whole different animal. But for what we're talking about, this is a business problem that we're trying to solve.
And Alan, your reaction?
Yeah, I think as respect to the board, I think there are a number of different ways that the board can be. First of all, we're starting, the world we live in now is that boards are acutely aware of this, I think, as an issue. It's coming, it's very visible. The proxy agencies, a lot of the asset owners are beginning to talk about this much more actively. So I think we're starting from that place. I think the committees have got a role to play, whether it's a CSR committee or the audit committee, looking at some of those, that creates awareness. And then I think the other area that really is important, actually, is that the board agenda gets something of this as a specific item to talk about, whether it's through a risk lens, which is to do with product and maybe a sourcing. In our example, it might be relevant. Joe's, I don't know your business well enough, Joe, but I'm sure there are areas where the board agenda can focus on this, and it then creates the attention of the board. Is what I would say. But I'd equally say that I think most board members, whether obviously the executives are there, but the non-execs, really important of the awareness of this. And then internal to the company, I think it comes down to visible leadership. I think leadership is really important in this area. I think that then creating the same amount of time or the appropriate amount of time within the organization to make sure that people do it and they see that it's as valuable. It's not something which is added on later in the day. It's not something which somebody else in the organization does. We all have our part to play in it. I think that's really important. And then talking about it, creating a time for people to learn. And then I wouldn't underestimate the importance of whatever incentive arrangements you have personal objectives in this area, I think, can be important. Not necessarily because people get paid by that. That's not always the motivator for everybody. But setting some of this area as a personal objective really helps individuals understand and their teams understand how important it is. So we've done it for example, in the treasury area, where we're committed to. We launched the first retailer to have a revolving credit facility in the UK with an ESG linkage to it. We did that a couple of months ago, and that treasury team had that as one of their objectives for this year. So they've known throughout the year that that's what they're going to be doing. I think those are some of the examples that I'd use for how do you get the organization as a whole to feel the benefit of this.
And you talk here about the incentivization, and you talk about the personal objectives, performance objectives. It's very interesting to see, because in order to do that effectively, you need effective KPIs. Mm-hmm. And KPIs that you can trust, KPIs that make sense to your business, etc. So how do you go about setting those KPIs for your business? Where do you even start?
Well, within Tesco, we're lucky because responsible sourcing, sustainable sourcing has been a key part of our organization for decades, and it's really important to customers, as I mentioned earlier. So we start with some deep knowledge about the factors, the issues that people are focused on within the organization, and we then work with them. They're generally working very often with third parties, whether they're NGOs or other agencies, government sometime as well. And we from that we develop a target which we believe is credible. Wherever possible, our targets will be, and our KPIs will be based on hard data. We adopted the science-based approach for everything where it's possible, and then from that, we then try and benchmark where we are today, because benchmarking is really important. And against that, set the ambition, and then break the ambition down into different multi-year, as I said. So it needs to be done step by step, case by case. And then you have to find, and this is quite difficult, you then have to find what's the really important KPI to take all the way up to the top, compared with leaving it as an important KPI in part of the organization. And that's just judgment and debate. So the executive committee need to talk about these things, I would suggest. Okay.
And Joe, your response to that?
Yeah, I'll take it a different direction than Alan, because I agree with everything that Alan said, but let me give a different take for the finance professional. You know, I'm going back to my metaphor of bringing a product to market. As part of those dialogues, we have targets. We want to have, say, 50 million in sales. Finance people have a role to play in that activity. And if you just think about the metrics, we want to be able to track the sales performance. We want to build the systems, the tool sets, the reporting, the monitoring, all of those types of things to build it. And again, if you can kind of think about it from that lens, it's easier. If you're having targets that are like on climate related milestones, like what Alan is talking about, you have to build out what is the plan of how we're going to get there. What levers do we need to pull in order to move faster? Again, very similar to what goes on in the natural business rhythm here. And I think when you do that, it doesn't make it daunting. You know, it doesn't make it where, wow, I just carbon emissions. I'm a technology company. Carbon emissions? What's that? So we're trying to really demystify it. And then when you can do that, you can get every one of your employees involved. So again, you kind of heard Alan at a higher level and me at a more tactical level. And when you get the two going together, you have magic.
Excellent. I like the magic, because I think sometimes that's exactly what is needed. So talking of magic, I think it is probably a good opportunity now to say that this event forms part of a series of events bringing together our Finance for the Future community. And the awards to me are magical because they bring these inspirational stories to the table. They show some amazing examples. They were founded in 2012, and they recognize financial leadership that is transformational in making an organization sustainable. And they also highlight the role that finance functions play in facilitating the kind of innovation and integrated thinking that makes such transformation possible. So I'd like at this point to share with you a short film about the awards. So if we could play the video now, please. And I'm delighted to announce that the 9th Finance for the Future Awards will open for applications in early 2021, with the award ceremony and winners to be announced in autumn to align with the rescheduled COP26. And I would very much encourage anyone who has been inspired today to consider entering. The awards really do tell amazing and inspirational stories. In Joe's words, they are part of that magic. And as a judge, I never cease to be impressed by the passion and the belief of those entering the awards that business can and should play its role in building a more sustainable and better world. So a question for you, Alan and Joe. What would you say to those who are thinking of entering the awards, and why should they enter?
I would say go ahead, do it. I think it comes back to some of what I was saying in terms of the organizational benefit. I think by getting people involved in this and creating the space and time, it shows that it's important. It actually creates, and certainly in Tesco's case, created a real sense of excitement and energy. It gave something outside. And also there was an element of competition in it, and competition is something which most finance people are pretty up for. But what you learn as well from seeing the different elements, the awards ceremony itself is a great opportunity. So I would just say, go ahead, do it. And even if you don't win in the first year, then do carry on, because very often the learnings come through, and that's where the organization comes back and actually builds the strength of it through coming.
Wonderful. And Joe?
Well, Veronica, I hope everyone can see this picture. This is me accepting the award on behalf of Salesforce a couple of years ago. And you can imagine, it's just like Alan was describing, there is a tremendous source of pride when your organization wins one of these things. But look, the real winner is the planet. That is the real winner, and we have not lost sight on that. I would add one thing to what Alan described is, by participating in this, you have access to a broader network and working with similar, with companies with like ideas, and their mindset is similar. I think that sharing and these programs really bring us together, allow us the opportunity to share ideas, share learnings. And at the end of the day, we all want to go faster and we all want to be more effective. And I think this is a vehicle to do that. And I agree with you, Alan. We love competition too. So
that is absolutely wonderful. I think you talk very passionately about the power of integrated thinking. You talk about the passion it creates within the organization and how it connects some of that philanthropical thoughts and activities with the actual core business propositions that lies behind each and every business. His Royal Highness in the opening remarks emphasized the opportunity to reset the economy to achieve a sustainable future, which is measured by well-being, not just global growth. And I think this just really goes to the core of what integrated thinking really tries to do. it tries to get that balance. I think, Joe, you mentioned in your remarks the stakeholder capitalism that we are trying to create here, the capitalism that moves away from just focusing on the financial capital and starts thinking about a balanced, better world for all of us, creating wealth for all stakeholders, not just the shareholders. I think it is really important to recognize that wealth creation is an important proposition here, that we all want to be wealthier, richer, better off, sustainable. We do need to do this in a profitable way, in a healthy for the economy, for the world way. So it's an interesting challenge for all of us, and every business really must play a role. And it starts with each and every one of us, and it starts with each board director. As you were saying, this granularity of taking it to each and every person within an organization so that it makes sense becomes quite key. So you need to take the whole organization on the journey. And you told some amazing stories. But I have a little bit of time here left for two last questions. And the first one that I really would like to do is to talk about the urgency of dealing with the need for urgency of dealing with climate change. And, you know, Joe, you touched upon this. We need to move fast. We really do. But is there a magic trick as to how can we all move faster? You talked about getting the power of many engaged. Any tips on how do we get the power of many going?
I think it's a great question, and we're certainly, you know, for me, I'm trying to learn from how COVID really changed our strategic plan. What was important prior to COVID was no longer relevant, and we had to pivot and shift and reimagine our own business. And I think if you can apply many of how that crisis came about, it's there. And a lot of it is just by pointing at tangible items here. We've certainly noticed in San Francisco area, the sky was orange, a color I've never seen in the years that I've been living in San Francisco. Once you bring in those real examples where, wow, somebody's got to do something, and it gets people going. And I think the fact is you have to really bring in your marketing teams to really capture something to drive change faster.
Okay, and Alan.
Gosh, I think what I would say is just start it. I do think that it is urgent. I think that the element of organizational engagement across is very, very important. But then, and this is where I think our approach is so relevant for us, and different organizations will have different approaches, but for us being essentially a store-based business where our colleagues are interacting with their communities, that is important. But above that, we also have to make some of the decisions which perhaps need to be the bigger ones. So a decision to equip all of our new vehicles as electric vehicles for delivery, really important. And that's almost a policy decision, which only at the more senior levels in the organization can we do. And it's that, for me, it's the marriage between some of the big policy decisions, and maybe they're capital intensive decisions, which we then have to take and hold ourselves true to, combined with those little things which everybody on the ground is doing. But don't underestimate the speed with which things can and do change. I do think that there is a real hope in the area of climate change. Of course, it's a huge challenge, but I really believe that, to your point, profitable businesses will be the ones that are sustainable, and they do go hand in hand. And it's important that we do make money in order to serve our colleagues and ultimately our customers and the planet.
Absolutely. And how could we possibly ever have any long-term vision? How can we not do so if we cannot actually direct the flow of money towards that long-term sustainable enterprise and be able to identify what is sustainable long-term? So not only do we need to have that passion, but we also need to understanding of the right policy decisions and who is making them. So communications, once again, become extremely important. So importance of telling your story. And that perhaps goes not only to the integrated thinking, but also to integrated reporting, which is also such an important aspect of integrated thinking across the organization, part of your engagement with stakeholders. Okay, so my last question for you two. I know I have been asking lots of questions to you today, but here is one. So there are a lot of people here, as we have seen on the poll results, that are very well engaged with the subject. They're somewhere on the journey already. There are some that are still only just about to start on the journey. So what would be your 2 or 3 key takeaways for those who are just embarking on the integrated thinking journey in their organization? What should be their first 2 or 3 steps that they should make? So who's going to go first? Joe, you go. You're ready.
I'll touch on this topic that's been coming through in this session, and that is really around leadership here. The tone has to start from someone at the top. And you can define what top means, but it's certainly, I think, if you're trying to go faster, if it is driven by a C-level executive, it moves faster. Certainly at Salesforce, we've had situations where it's come from the most junior people have created an entire movement in dealing with topics like racial injustice. So I don't want to be dismissive of it, but I do think that it has to come from tone at the top, leadership, demonstrative leadership, someone carrying the flag that's out there. I think another tip, and people are actually doing it right now by attending many of the sessions here. I think when you look at all the sessions like the one we've had today, you can cobble together a pretty nice plan to think through. I think a third thing is that you have to be very mindful that you're building out a plan that's going to take long. It'll take years to deal with. And as a finance professional, we're all used to building current year plans, multi-year plans, long-range plans. And I think just stay within those rhythms that are there, and it's just not as daunting. I'd probably also say, I'll give you a fourth idea. I would join A4S. All the programs, the guides, and the materials that are there. There are so many tool sets that are available today that I really wish was available when we started several years ago.
Awesome. Thank you for these 4 tips. Excellent. Alan.
I would have started with leadership as well, because I do think it's so critical. However, I think the other area I would say is that most organizations have part of this sitting already as part of the organization, and bringing that exists, but because of the way that it's developed, it very often does sit in a slightly different part of the organization. It was maybe the CSR agenda, and it was looked at either through comms, sometimes IR. I think the finding a way of bringing all of that activity into the day-to-day processes of the business and just making it part and parcel of the processes of the business, to me is hugely beneficial, because it means that it does become part of the everyday thinking, the everyday rhythm. And just like on a capital appraisal, you need to sign off on a number of elements. Bringing these factors, the KPIs, let's say, into that part of it means that you're capturing it as part of the overall flows of the organization. And then picking up on Joe's point, I do think that there's, in all organizations, there's probably a bigger groundswell of desire to be involved in this area, particularly from younger folk in the organization, and finding a way to capture that in a way which then really gives them the time and space to be part of it, I would encourage, and talk about it. Integrated reporting is a relatively, in fact, a very flexible framework. Adopt integrated reporting, push yourselves, push your organization to do it, and the power and the magic will be there.
Marvelous. And now I really have to ask you a follow-up question, because you mentioned those words, integrated reporting, again, as potentially a driver of some of the integrated thinking within the organization. In my earlier comments, I was talking about the fact that integrated thinking has to be prerequisite for integrated reporting. Now, do you agree with that supposition, or do you think it's a little bit of a chicken and egg?
I see it as I think it's a circular. I think it's a yin and a yang. I think that they are part and parcel, and the fact that one may be slightly more developed than the other, I don't think matters. I do think both of them need to be there. And even if your integrated thinking isn't very well developed, your integrated reporting muscle can pick that up, and they do feed off each other, and you end up with a stronger, more powerful combination of the two.
I'm absolutely delighted to hear you say that. International Integrated Reporting Council and the IR framework have invested really heavily in trying to get that integrated reporting muscle going. But of course, always recognizing that integrated thinking is part and parcel, as you say. Our time today is up, but I do hope that you have found the session interesting and stimulating, and that you will leave with some ideas, particularly that final list that our speakers have just given to us, how to further your own journey towards integrated thinking. So many thanks to our wonderful panelists, Alan and Joe, who have spoken with such candor about their own experience. And thank you all for your active participation in the polls. And apologies for the little glitch at the beginning, but we did make it go. And I do hope that many of you will join us tomorrow for the third in our series of Finance for the Future events, which is focused on moving financial markets and how can we accelerate financial markets to drive a green and fair recovery. So with that, thank you everyone and have a great day.